Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode in Software Engineering and Salesforce. My name is Brooks Johnson, and today we're going to talk about the observer pattern. Something I think is one of the essential design patterns that you have to know, has tons of real-world application, and you use it all the time. So today we're going to build this kind of silly little full-stack app, but common business case, right? We have a product, or we have something, whatever. We want our users to be able to know. So in this case, we have a product that's out of stock or is not available yet. And we want users to be able to say, hey, yes, I would like to be told when it is available, right? So, we just want a user to be able to go in and type, fake at, fake.com, all right, something like that. Hit update me, and all right, we're going to let them know when it's available. I'm not sure why I got an invalid format, but that's okay because it's not really hooked up yet. So we'll refresh that page. So that's what we're going to build. And then we're going to talk about how does all of that back-end structure work to support that front-end app so that users can subscribe when that event happens and that product is now available. So take a second, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you and we'll get into the code. All right, so let's go over, let's talk about it first before we actually get into the code. What is the observer pattern, all right? So let's scroll up here to Wikipedia. So it's a software design pattern, right? And we're going to have an object called the subject of some sort. And the subject maintains a list of dependents. And those are called the observers. And it notifies them of any state changes, usually by calling one of their methods. So this is used all over the place. You'll hear it also called pub sub. Platform events are a way to implement this. Today we're going to implement it just with a trigger. By all means, take this, refactor it, do it with platform events. Maybe I'll do that in another video, but just to keep things simple today, I went with a trigger implementation. And it's designed so one object, what problems does this solve, right? So we can have one object, right, our subject, notify many of its dependents while keeping them loosely coupled. And that way when one object changes state, and what does it say? I like how an open-ended number of lost the word there for a second. An open-ended number of dependents are going to get updated automatically. So if we go back to, right, and this is, I think this is super common, right? So we have a product, the Ovenator 5000, if we remember some of our old Universal Pizza applications, right? Universal Pizza is going to release a new pizza oven. Product isn't available yet, but we'd like customers to be able to say, hey, cool, I am really excited about the new Ovenator 5000, and I want to know the second it's available so I can buy one, right? So they're going to go in, they're going to be able to put in their email, and when things change state, when the Ovenator 5000 is available, we are going to notify them. So a little bit of housekeeping. If you're following along, you want to code along with me. There's a couple S objects built into the background to support this. Because one of the things, right, with Apex, with Salesforce, is Apex doesn't really, maintain state, right? It's not like we're doing a web app where, state, as long as, the browser's open, we can maintain state. Or, the Java virtual machine runs. We only have state as long as the life of an Apex transaction, which isn't very long. So we need to have a couple S objects in the background to support us. So for this video, right, I've got two. I have product catalog and product notification. I have a checkbox, is available on my product catalog, and just a name. They're auto-numbered. You build these however you want to build them. And then a notification, right? And the notification has a lookup relationship, right? So there's a one-to-many relationship here between our catalog and our notifications. And it takes in an email address, a subscribe checkbox, and a send email checkbox. I'm not even using the send email checkbox in this video. Now that I think about it, put it in there, and then I guess I never used it. So go ahead if you want to code along with me. You'll need to put these S objects in for everything to make sense and to do it. But let's get in and let's get started. All right, so I'm going to switch over to Illuminated Cloud and IntelliJ. Here is a rough UML diagram, right? So we're going to have two interfaces. We're going to have a subject interface, and it's going to implement subscribe, unsubscribe, and notify observers. We're going to have an observer interface with just the notify. Then we'll have to have a concrete implementation of our subject, right? And that's going to be our product subject. And it's going to have a collection of observers, right? So it's going to actually have a collection of these product observers. And that is going to be our concrete, because remember, that I means it's an interface, right? So it's an abstract data type. So we have to have a concrete class, product observer, that implements iObserver. And in our UML, like that little diamond there, that represents an aggregation, right? So this means, inherits from. So product observer is a concrete implementation of our, iObserver interface. Our product subject, which is a concrete implementation of our iSubject interface, is going to have a collection, right, of observers, right? And then it's going to, here's a little note, like you saw this in Wikipedia. At the end of the day, what's kind of key here, it knows how, so our subject, it knows how to subscribe, unsubscribe, and notify. And remember, we talked about it by calling a method in the observer. So really, at the end of the day, what we're going to do here is for observer in the observer collection, observer.notify. And that's what's actually going to send the email out to that observer. So there's a fair amount of code here to write today. Everything, I built this ahead of time, right? So we have a demo on Wikipedia. So once in a while I may grab something and copy and paste it straight in. But I'll try to do everything best I can in real time and hopefully do a pretty good job explaining this. I think it's going to be a fun one. So the first thing we're going to need is, right, because we have two abstract data types here. We need our interfaces, right? So we're going to do a new Apex class, and I'm going to say iSubject. All right, that's going to be our first interface. All right, and iSubject. All right, I'm going to say void subscribe, and I am going to have it take in a product notification S object for this video. Real production code, right? I would probably want this to be more generic and just take in an S object, but for today, we'll do it like this. And we'll spell observer correctly. Observer, okay. And we're going to need void unsubscribe. Same thing. And void notify observers. Okay, so those are the three methods that any class that implements iSubject must provide the logic for, right? So now we also need our iObserver class. iObserver. Again, that's going to be another interface. This will allow us to exploit polymorphism. Void notify. And that's it. All right, so I'm going to push these two up to my Scratch org. Give that a second. Little pokey. Little pokey. There we go. Everything should have gone. You need to get rid of that JSON param next time. All right, good. So everything is pushed up. So now let's start talking about how are we going to implement, what are these going to look like? We have our interfaces. And remember, interfaces are nothing more than an abstract data type where we say, hey, here are methods that any class that implements this interface must define exactly how this works. So now we need a concrete subject and we need a concrete observer. All right, so first off, I think let's build our subject class. Okay, so I am going to new Apex class, and I'm going to say product I'm going to call it the product subject because that's what I did in the UML diagram earlier when I built this, right? It's just a little everyday Apex class. All right, and it's going to take and it needs to implement, this is pretty important, all right? Implements iSubject, all right. Now, Alt Insert, Implement. I'm going to let IntelliJ stub these out for me just so I can get rid of that red squiggly there. Okay, cool. Then it's going to take in a property of I'm going to say string ID. All right. I'm going to need a constructor, public, product subject, string ID. I'm going to say this ID equals ID. And again, if anybody's asking, I am using, down here, I'm using tab 9 for some kind of fancy AI code completion. I feel like I've done enough Apex now that it's actually learned pretty well, and you'd see I think it helps me write a little bit faster. All right, so now let's go to our, so for this video we're not actually going to, we're not actually going to implement unsubscribe. We'll just leave it later. And in fact, we'll just, somebody calls it, we'll just put a system debug in there. This video is more about how do we do the notification part. Called unsubscribe. All right, so that's all we need there. Let's go back up to our subscribe. So all subscribe does, right? So our subject should know how to subscribe or attach an observer to itself. So in this case, because we know, hey, we are receiving a product notification, and product notification actually has a subscribe field, right? So we are, and it has, remember, a field to have the catalog ID. So we're going to say observer product catalog C equals this dot ID. Okay, so now we've defined that. Look, I put a typo in my catalog name, so forgive me for that. So now observer's defined that one-to-many relationship between it, or the subject has defined the one-to-many relationship between itself and its observers, and it's just going to say observer dot subscribe C equals true, right? And if we were really going to do unsubscribe, we would just set that to false, right? And we'll just say insert observer. Okay, so we've got our subscribe, we have our unsubscribe, and we're going to come back and we're going to do notify in a second. What occurred to me, I have to take a pause here because we built this as kind of a full stack app to show, I think some of these help to show the full, like from the client, from something on the UI to how this is working in Apex. So I need to take a second and update our controller. So we have an observer pattern controller class here, and it has a subscribe user method, all right? So what we need to do is say, when that is clicked, product notification C, all right, that's what we want, product notification C. I'm going to call it my observer equals new product notification C. Okay, and I'm going to say email address C equals email. Okay. And then we're going to pass that off to our subject class, iSubject. No, don't capitalize it. I'm just going to say subject equals new product subject. And we need the ID. All right, so we're going to pass in the product ID into the constructor. And we're going to say subject dot subscribe observer. All right. And let's compile all that. And then the JavaScript here, the Lightning Web Components are all written, but we'll take a quick look at it. All right, so while we're waiting for that, let's switch over. LWC. This is not a Lightning Web Component video, but we'll just take a quick look at it if you're curious, right? So when that component loads, right, it's calling the controller and it's loading a list of the product catalog. And subscribe user is just going to pass in the product ID that it already has from when this loaded, and the value that the user put in for their email, right? It shows a toast, and if there's an error, it's going to log it. So that should actually all work. We should have that piece built. So let's go over recently viewed product notifications. All right, so there should actually be none, I think, right now, right? So there are no product notifications. So if we did this correctly, I'll say test at fake.net. Update me. All right, cool. We will let you know when it's available. Let's see if that worked. Awesome. All right, we have a product notification. They are set to subscribe. Ignore that send email that I put in and that are never used in this video because I'm just a free guy doing free stuff on the internet, I guess. Emails, right? It has the correct lookup. So we're cooking with gas. All right. So our subject class now knows how to attach an observer to it, right? It knows how to attach those subscribers. And the next thing we need to do is work on our observer class, right? So our observer class, and let's go back up here. Make another new Apex class. I'm going to call this one product observer. Close out that terminal. Give us a little more screen space. I think I can even zoom in. All right, and now let's a product observer, which also needs to implement our observer interface. Observer. Okay. Bam. Okay. Now we need a member property once again. We need an ID. So I'm just going to say string ID. Again, we're in another constructor. And I need to make that public. Lowercase. Public product observer, string ID. All right, so for our notify method. All right, first off, because you remember we talked about our UML, right? What's really going on here is for observer in collection, right? It knows how to observer.notify. All right, so we are going to, I'm just going to copy and paste a SOQL query right in there. That's subject, observer. And I do want to point out, hold on, I'm going to get rid of that for a second. I am not at all a fan of inline SQL like this. I think it very tightly couples you to the database. And I thought about in this video maybe showing how do we mock that out, but it was just too much. So I'm hoping in the next couple of weeks I do a video on the builder pattern, and we want to talk about some ways we can solve that problem. Observers equals. Okay. And then we're just going to say for so we're going to get all the observers that are listening to that particular product catalog notification. And we're going to say for product notification, see, we're going to say observer and observers. And we're just going to mock the, we're not going to really send an email for this. We're just going to do system.debug, sending an email to observer, email address C. All right. So that will be our mock email implementation. And let's compile that and get rid of that JSON. Okay, everything compiled now, so we are just about ready to do this. I wanted to talk, again, I didn't want to make it the focus of this video. In the repo, I brought in, I'm a big fan of Kevin O'Hara's trigger handler. So it's right here. Just if you're not familiar with it, I think it's absolutely fantastic. Lightweight trigger handler. I've been using it for several years. Just Google Kevin O'Hara's trigger handler. And it's the one I usually go to for production stuff. And then I have this product catalog trigger handler, right? We are going to override, I just commented this out, but pretty standard stuff, right? We're going to override the before update. And we're going to say, for, catalog and trigger.new. And, this is the same trigger logic we've all done a million times. Old catalog, trigger.oldmap.get. And then we're going to say, hey, if product catalog, is available as true and the old value is false, we're going to create a new subject, give it an ID, and we're going to say subject.notify observers, right? Because that subject knows how to notify its observers, right? So if we go B, and we actually didn't implement that yet, did we? I was thinking, I've been kind of all over the place here with some of my code. I was like, I don't think I actually implemented that. Hold on. So let's do that. We won't get far if we don't do this last very critical piece. And all right, so I would say observer equals new product observer, and we're going to pass in the ID, this.id. And then observer dot observer.notify. All right. Remember, so now the state changed, right? So, and this is the class, so our subject class, right? We know the state changed on the back end. An admin is going to go in and they're going to change the value in that field from true to false, or to make it so that product is now available, right? So we have a list of everybody, of all of our notification, all of our subscribers that want to be notified when that state changes. And we're going to, from the trigger called notify observers, it's going to instantiate a new product observer class, giving it, the ID of the class in question or of the record in question, and call observer.notify, right? And our concrete observer knows what to do. It says, hey, go get every single record of everybody that said they were interested in when a product catalog with that particular ID, when that value changed, where subscribe equals true, right? And then send them an email. So let's push that up. All right, let's double check. I want to double check our trigger handler. Do we have not trigger handler, our product trigger handler. All right, subject.notify observers. All right. So, right, what happened, right? Admin's going to go in. If they change the value on that checkbox, right? If it is now true and the old value is false, so the state changed on that S object. We have all of those related through the lookup value of the product notification type that's saying, hey, we want to know when that state changes. And then, so we instantiate a new product subject, giving it the ID right here of the record that those subscribers, those observers are interested in, right? Because it's that one-to-many relationship. And then we call notify observers, all right? And once again, right, the subject, if we go back and we look at that, right, this is right, it's calling a, observer.notify. And the observer class is saying, we actually know how to do the notification. We know what to do. You just call the method, right, and we'll take care of the logic. So let's go and let's do this. Okay, so let's make one more fake, we'll say fake at gmail.com. Okay. And I don't know why I'm getting them. I'm supposed to put a space in there or something. Let's, all right, so we have two product notification records. We have one product catalog. Let's go take a look at it. Right, and right now, right, so we are about to change, if ever we did everything right, we're going to change its state. Is available is going to equal true. Let's make sure my dev console is listening. And let's clear our console. Let's clear that log panel out. Here's this old stuff from when I tested this earlier. All right, let's edit. Because that's what it's all about. All those other observers are subscribed for this particular state change. The Ovenator 5000 is about to be publicly available. Boom, let's hit it. All right, let's go back to our dev console. Hit debug. All right, so we can see it worked, right? It sent an email to test@fake.net, and it sent an email to fake@gmail.com. So there you have it, folks. That is the observer pattern. And so I hope this is useful. I tried to really, I think hopefully it makes more sense if we really cover like how does this whole system communicate, talk to each other from our application here on the front end, right? Our Lightning Web Component, to which is going to has that controller class. The controller class instantiates a type of iSubject that knows how to subscribe, right? So it handles that subscription logic. Then when we change the state, right, we're working. In this case, we implemented a trigger. Trigger says, hey, when it is available now, before it was not, then go get everybody that was interested and that wanted to be notified, send them an email. So that's the observer pattern. Again, this is just one way to implement it. You could absolutely do this whole same thing with platform events. This video, I thought it'd be easier, simpler, just to do it with a trigger. I hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments. Again, take a second, hit like and subscribe, and I'll see everybody next time.